The Sackler family said they had no responsibility for the opioid crisis in court this week and threatened to go back on a $4.5 billion pledge to help communities affected by opioid addiction, despite the company's deadly role in the spread of OxyContin, a drug that fueled the opioid epidemic. That is, unless the owners of Purdue Pharma are granted broad legal immunity. And the threat is a blow to a settlement plan negotiated over 2 years between the Sacklers and local governments. David Sirota, founder of the Daily Poster, joins us now to discuss. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So what are they? So they're saying that they're going to renege on this. Is that what's happening? That they want immunity, or they're not going to be giving this money out to the families?
Well, it's not just that they want immunity. It's that they want all of the parties that they are listing in the court case to have immunity. And that's hundreds of there's family members, there's vendors, there's other businesses that they own. That's what's really at issue here, is that the Sacklers are trying to use bankruptcy law to effectively protect their entire corporate empire and their family's empire. And what's at issue in front of Congress with a piece of legislation called the Sackler Act is whether bankruptcy judges should be allowed to extend protection from prosecution to people and parties who are not actually declaring bankruptcy. See, what's going on here is that the Sacklers went into bankruptcy court and said Purdue Pharma is bankrupt. The Purdue Pharma entity is bankrupt. We as the family are using that to declare bankruptcy. But then what they're also saying is that we, the family, and all of these other parties, if we sign on to a settlement agreement through this bankruptcy, we cannot be essentially prosecuted by state attorney generals, we cannot be a target of other lawsuits. So it's extending blanket legal immunity to the entire Sackler corporate empire and their affiliate people and vendors in exchange for this settlement, even though those people and those vendors themselves are not actually declaring bankruptcy.
David, let me ask you, what's your sense of what the public position is around this? Are people aware enough of it that there is public outcry and that there is a push for accountability here?
Well, look, I think that the recent documentary on HBO, Alex Gibney's documentary, helped get the word out about what really happened in the opioid crisis. Same for Patrick Radden Keefe's book, which got a huge audience. I think there's a general sense that the Sacklers did a lot of horrible things and that they are essentially, if not getting off scot-free, they're getting off with effectively a slap on the wrist, allowing them to keep billions of dollars if this settlement happens. So I think it's part of a larger story in America where the wealthy and the powerful do terrible things and have a justice system which is designed effectively to protect them in a way, by the way, that system does not protect regular people.
And what cards do the Sacklers have to play? You know, regular people would just wonder, why not just prosecute these people? Like they don't have any public protection. So of course they have billions of dollars, but they are universally reviled among the public and among the media. So what is it? What cards do they have that is allowing them to even make these threats?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think it's that states want money in the door to do all sorts of mitigation programs, treatment programs, addiction, programs. The states want that money, and that actually fighting each individual case on an individual kind of situation will take years and years and years. I mean, probably decades. So I think there's like a from the policymakers' perspective, there's kind of a take the bird in hand, a couple $1 billion. That's a good deal. Better to take a quarter of a loaf than spend 20 years trying to get the whole loaf. But I agree with you. I mean, the Sacklers, what leverage do they really have? And that's the big question. And I think this is why they want this settlement so badly, which is not just about the money. It's about that immunity I mentioned, where they can immunize themselves forever, for eternity, from future criminal lawsuits, civil lawsuits related to all of this. Again, the Sackler Act in Congress, which hasn't moved in the Democratic Congress, would essentially say that judges cannot extend that kind of blanket immunity to parties that have not actually said that they're bankrupt. But that bill has been bottled up in the Democratic Congress.
So I've got to ask you, you mentioned civil lawsuits. Have there been any filed to date, victims of the opioid epidemic? And where would those stand, or would they just be wiped out if this deal is in fact struck?
If this deal is struck, as I understand it, it would essentially immunize all of those parties that were listed that have pending litigation against the Sacklers, against Purdue Pharma. It would basically say, in exchange for this bankruptcy settlement, where the Sacklers put in about $4.5 billion and get to keep another $7 or $8 billion, in exchange for that, the Sacklers also and that list gets essentially legal immunity in eternity. And it's a good deal for the Sacklers, too, because there's an estimate out there that says that the money that they're going to fork over in this settlement, they would actually, through interest and through investment, it actually wouldn't end up reducing the amount of money that they have, because the amount of money that they'd be allowed to keep would pretty well grow to essentially overcome the amount of money that they would have to fork over. So it's not even really much of a punishment at all.
Very important reporting. David, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be following this story.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And more rising after this.